Welcome to a special edition of Dispatch Radio. This is the third in our four-part series recapping our live Rare Air Talks event at the Studio Boulder on May 17th, sponsored by the Colorado Outdoor Recreation Industry Office. In this episode, you will hear from Jamie Logan, a pioneering rock climber who in her later years transitioned to living life as a woman. She shares her story with journalist Chris Weidner.
Backcountry Colorado, hiking, backpacking.
I did a lot of marathons. I was convinced to do some ultras.
Climbing, and I do filming and photography.
I just like the ultras because I love the community. I just think that everybody is so nice, whether they're the first place finishers or, you know, us that kind of mosey along.
Hello, everybody. My name's Chris Weidner, and I'm a journalist here in Boulder. I work for the Daily Camera, and this is Jamie Logan. So I distinctly remember the first time I met Jamie. It was in 2001, and I had just moved from Seattle to Boulder. I was working as a climbing guide in the Boulder Rock Club, and I saw Jamie across the room, and at the time, Jamie was Jim Logan. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's one of my climbing heroes, just right here in the gym. I didn't get that in Seattle. And I could only think about, some of the many accomplishments. The first free ascent of the Diamond up on the Longs Peak in Colorado. The first ascent of the Emperor Face on Mount Robson, which is this 8,000-foot alpine wall of loose rock and ice on the highest peak in the Canadian Rockies. It was the most badass alpine climb that had ever been done in North America at the time. And there's Jamie. And so I was just checking, wanted to make sure with my friend Matt, like, hey, is that actually Jim Logan? And he said, yeah. And I was like, dude, he is the man. And that's just how I remember the first meeting. And now here we are. And now I'm here next to Jamie Logan. And we actually had a really cool conversation at her house in Boulder a few weeks ago. We sat out back and talked for a couple hours. And it all started with Jamie explaining a couple of the constants throughout her life. The first was that ever since she was little, she loved to just climb about anything. Rocks, fences, trees. And the other constant was that even way back then, as a little boy, she really liked to wear women's clothing. And I thought that was kind of a neat way to start then. And how about if we start right there, Jamie? Tell us a bit more about that.
Okay, so this is the first time I've ever actually spoken to a group, so bear with me a little bit. So I think, two of the main constants in my life is I love to climb up things, and I was always uncomfortable with being a boy. And in West Texas in the 1950s, it really wasn't much of an option. You went to the barber and they just cut your hair off. They didn't ask, they just cut it off. But even then I had a sense of that I didn't fit in, and I was pretty socially uncomfortable. And that was sort of a constant through many, many years of my life. I was always literally sneaking around in the closet, and always terribly afraid that I was going to get caught. And I think having this giant secret kind of made me kind of grumpy and unhappy a lot of the time. But I sort of didn't really feel like there was an option. I always thought that if anybody ever found out, that would kind of be the end of my life, that I couldn't imagine how it could possibly work. And you have to remember, this is before there was an internet or anything else. There were little glimmers out there. I remember reading a magazine article when I was like 10 or 11 of a soldier in England who had transitioned to being a woman, and there was a picture of her sitting there in a chair wearing a tweed skirt and a sweater, and I was like, wow, But it was 1958, and so there was like, maybe there's possibilities, but I didn't really understand it. So basically, I lived my life. I was married. I had children. I was a general contractor and a carpenter. I was climbing an awful lot through the 70s. And eventually I went to architecture school and became an architect. And my current partner, about maybe 15 years ago, I had told her a little bit. And quite honestly, I didn't understand what I wanted or what was going on. But we talked about it a little bit, and I would wear women's clothes in the house sometimes. And it sort of gradually progressed over a long period of time. I don't think she thought much of it. But it seemed like it became bigger and bigger as time went by. And about maybe 8 or 9 years ago, she outed me to 2 of my kids. And actually, one of them was my gay son, who was kind of upset because I think he'd sort of built his whole sense of himself around antagonism to what he called my male ego. So he was like, wait a minute. So now there were 3 people that kind of knew, but I still didn't know what this meant. So I started going to therapy, and actually a sort of a pivotal moment was I was invited to be on the board of the American Alpine Club. So I went up to Seattle to go to a board meeting, and I hired turns out a trans woman to help me get dressed, and we went to the mall, and we went shopping, and I was just terrified. And we went to a restaurant, had dinner, and it all seemed fine, and I was like, wow, I really like this. And then I put on my coat and tie and went to the board meeting of the American Alpine Club. So it was kind of like being in these 2 worlds. The climbing world, when I started in the 60s, was all white men. There were a few women. Jane Colton had free-climbed Yellow Spur. When I was in Vietnam. When I came back from Vietnam, there were a few women climbers. Beth Bennett, Molly Higgins, but still hardly any women. No people of color. But it was an exciting time in climbing. We were kind of inventing it and making it all up. So I don't know why I digressed back into that. But in any case, so now it's 8 or 10 years ago, and I come back and I'm doing lots of therapy. And it's sort of, the longer I talk to my therapist about it, the more I started realizing that I wanted to actually change my life. It was really terrifying. I was like, well, I don't want to screw up my kids. Right? That was a really scary thing. And so I had to come out to the other 2 of them, which I did, and they were all great. And I was making decisions, sort of incremental decisions. I decided to grow my hair long. I decided to get rid of my beard, which is a many-year, many thousands of dollars proposition. It's a hot needle that kills the hairs one at a time. It's very painful, and it's a process. But I sort of committed to this, and I still wasn't sure how far I was going to go, because everything I was doing was sort of, I could still be in the world and pretend that I was just like everybody else, right? And as this went along, I started getting more and more of a sense that I actually wanted to present as a female person. And I didn't really know what that was going to mean. And I was really, really afraid of all the people like Chris, that in the climbing world, of would anybody ever climb with me again? You know, was I going to be some kind of weird pariah? And I also was a successful architect, and I thought, will anybody ever hire me again? I'm like, I can't imagine why anybody would hire me dressed in women's clothes to be in charge of their $3 million house. You know, like that's not going to happen. But I thought, okay, here I go. I'm just going to go for it. And so I started telling people, and every time I told more people, somehow it got better. And there was a point in time when I told one of the climbers who lived with a woman who tells everybody everything, and I walked into the climbing gym one day, and all these women came up and started hugging me, and I'm like, what is going on? And then a good friend who knew came up and said, well, you told Jesse Huey, and Jesse Huey told Olivia, and it's like, that was that. So I thought, okay, now I'm full in gossip world. And I thought, okay, well, who do I have to tell? Well, the people that own the climbing gym, I designed the climbing gym, so they're my clients, so I don't want them to hear it as gossip. So then I felt this need to figure out who I needed to tell personally right now. And every time I told somebody, it got better. And then Cedar Wright, without asking me, outed me in an article in Climbing Magazine. And it just was a continual getting better. And finally it got to the point that I changed my gender on my driver's license, and I was dressing the way I wanted to, and I'm going to the construction jobs, and everybody's been great, quite frankly. And I'm a lot happier, and I'm totally happy that I did it. And I never dreamed that it would come to me being, in a sense, kind of the token trans person, which I seem to sort of be, because there aren't very many people like me. But it seems okay, and it seems important. I think that the goal of this is for me to help all those kids that feel that they don't fit in, all the kids that feel like they can't be in the world, that if they could read an article in a magazine about me and go, oh, I can do this, that's a good thing. So that's why I'm here, basically.
That's amazing. It's wonderful to hear that the climbing community and your family and all of your coworkers have accepted you, and that everything's gotten better. There was kind of a rough time with Sherry, your wife, but you guys seem to work it out, and now you're both happier. Is that right?
Well, I'm happier. I don't know if she is, but it wasn't what she signed up for. There was a point when I said she was going to her therapist, I was going to my therapist, and then we had a therapist for the relationship, the marriage. And there was a point when I said, okay, I want to do this. I want to live my life in a female way, and I want to take hormones and stuff like that. And she was, at some point, she sort of freaked out. She said, I don't know if I can do this. And we actually separated for not very long, but it was really terrifying to me because her relationship is my most important relationship outside of my children. And but we worked it out, and it took a lot of talking and a lot of work. And now I think we're both doing great. And I think I'm fundamentally a happier person than I was. I don't get mad. It makes my architecture much better because I don't ever get angry at anything. And it turns out there's really a lot of women who really don't want to hire a male architect. And so in some ways, I've become more desirable as an architect to certain people just because I can talk about the closet and whatever. I'm a fairly broad. I have a broad level of experience.
That's awesome. And actually, speaking of your broad level of experience, you told me one thing when we were talking at your house a few weeks ago that I thought was really interesting. Is that you're not a woman, but you're also not a man anymore. You are somewhere in between. And can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it's actually really important for everybody to understand that there's a pretty wide range of gender stuff. And now we have kids who are at a very young age are very certain about that they're the other gender than they've been identified as, and can essentially shift and start living their whole life in their preferred gender. There's also really a lot of people that don't feel comfortable in either gender. So there's a lot of people that feel that they're a girl but they're boyish, or they're a boy but they're girlish, or that they're a woman who just happens to climb 513 who kind of wishes they'd been born a boy but are not going to do anything about that because they're okay sort of with the body that they have. So there's a huge spectrum, and that comes down to this thing of asking of somebody when you look at someone, we have an instinctive I think you said biological, which I think is accurate, the need to gender people immediately. So you very quickly look at somebody and go, boy or girl. But there's a lot of people living in the in-between, and there's a lot of people that feel like the gender that might not be what you visually identify them as. So it's especially with young people, they're really good at this. It's okay to ask. It's really easy to say, what gender do you prefer? What pronoun do you prefer, right? Do you prefer he, him, or she, her, or they, or there's a million terms that I can't keep track of. Gender studies kids all argue about. And I think it's kind of working its out culturally. But so for me, my lived experience is as a white male privileged person. And I think I benefited from that in many ways that I didn't even realize at the time. But because I didn't really start changing until I was in my mid-60s, there's all kinds of experiences that I missed out on. I never got to go to slumber parties and learn how to do my hair from the other girls, right? So I lived most of my life as a white male person. And now I'm living my life in a more female way. But I'm still pretty boyish at times. And when I'm at a job and there's 15 people in the room and we're talking about something that's $200,000 and it's screwed up, and I sort of take over the meeting and start running it, people pretty generally go back to he pretty quickly. And then when we get through that and we stop, then they go back to she. So it's pretty fascinating to watch that shift. And I think when I'm doing that, I'm actually being really stereotypical masculine. And it's not about gender. It's like we have a problem. We have to all figure this out and make it work. And the people in the jobs are pretty good about calling me she, and then they screw up and they call me he, and then they get nervous. And I'm like, I don't care. It's fine. It took me a while to get a thick skin to that. And partly it's this recognition of that I wasn't going to get plastic surgery to make myself look more feminine. I could afford to do that. But I have a history. I have a lived experience as a male person, and that's real, and it's always there. And so I'll never be a real girl. But I actually socialize with women. I climb almost exclusively with women these days. And I get to climb with the best women in the country, which is kind of fun. And it's great.
That's awesome. So back to climbing then. Climbing is historically has blatantly been quite misogynistic, whether it's in online forum topics, route names, certainly in everyday slang that climbers have used. I guess my question is, how would you like to see climbing culture and ultimately, of course, all culture change to become more inclusive?
Well, I think what it takes is recognition that there are a lot of different people out there who are involved, that there are lots of gay rock climbers. And I've been to a couple of the national LGBT climbing festivals and climbed with mostly guys, some women, no trans people that I've been with yet. But in any case, they feel much more comfortable when they're with each other, and part of it has to do with language, part of it has to do with if they send a route and they come down, they're all excited. They want to kiss their boyfriend. They want that to be okay. And when there's 100 of them, it's fine. And so somehow it has to get to where it's fine everywhere all the time. And I really do feel optimistic. I think it's changing. I think, from when I was a little kid growing up in West Texas, there were 3 bathrooms. There were men, women, and color, in my lifetime. And there were no out gay people anywhere. So it's so much better than it was in 1960. And I just think it's getting better all the time. So I think organizations like your group of the gay people being together as a group, help people see that there are gay people and that they're okay, and that we're all just people. We're all just trying to get by and have a good life. And so I think climbing is getting better along with the rest of America, basically. There's still I read somebody on the internet today that said, oh, that person is such a pansy. There's the idea of doing something hard is called sacking up. There's just a huge amount of terminology that is so heterosexual, male-centered. And it's actually offensive, and I don't think people kind of realize it. And like climbing route names, they're so bad. It's just horrible. All these names that 18-year-old boys would put on climbs. And historically, once somebody names a climb, it has to stay that name forever. And I'm wondering when we can just go through and purge. Yeah. Well, I was talking to Russ, and he said about that, and I said, well, what are you climbing on? He said, Wet Dream. I said, okay, there you go. That's his project, Wet Dream, which is not that far from Tits Up, and it just goes on and on and on. So I think there's a lot of stuff to sort of fix over time. But, Deanne's the president of the American Alpine Club. So that's the first woman who's ever done that, I think. Or no, second, yeah. Anyway, I just think it's getting better. And you can't go to a climbing gym these days and watch all the people climbing and not see that half of them are women, and women on the whole are climbing just as well as the guys. Margot Hayes grew up here, the first woman to ever climb 515, and Sasha Julian, and there's a lot of really good women climbers. I climb a lot with this gay woman, Madeline Sorkin, who can lead 513 coming out of a hammock on day 5. 513 trad, placing gear. She's a really good rock climber. Yeah, I think it's getting better.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Jamie, thanks. It took a lot of courage to come up here, your first ever talk in front of people, in front of a group about this. So I really appreciate that. And we all do. And I would be honored to climb with you.
This is rare air, guys. This is rare. You don't know what to expect. It's rare. If I can balance, if I can balance on the stage here. If anybody has a question for Jamie, I mean, we're an intimate audience here. If anybody has a burning desire, we have one already in the back here. I'm going to run a mic back because we have Alpine Audio here, and they are pros.
Jamie, thank you so much. So I have a question. As I'm Deanne Buck, you just introduced me. I'm the president of the American Alpine Club, and then I also am the executive director of Canberra Outdoors, and Jamie and I have been friends for a while. I think the language that you have, so when you think about yourself 15 years ago and your ability to articulate even your, like where you are now in your space, how did you come to that? Did you study? Did you read about it? Or is it something that you've just really kind of really challenged yourself to understand? Because I think like listening to you and in your ability to articulate where you've been and where you are now is something that a lot of white heterosexual men maybe don't have the capability or the capacity to have that language.
Well, I think the internet happened for starters, and so then it's like, wow, I'm not the only person like this, and then essentially a lot of therapy. That was, talking to therapists. And then going to the Homo Fantastic and hanging out with all the big guys, and you just start to realize. But I think actually for me, I actually really like women. There's a party and all the men go in the kitchen and they brag essentially, and all the women go in the living room and they talk about stuff. And so I just always thought, wow, that's really wonderful. I wish I could be over there with them. And now I can. But I don't know how I learned, I guess. I think it's just trying to be aware of what's going on. And I think the whole country's learning, basically. And I think that one of the issues is that there's a lot of power shifting happening right now between particularly women and white male culture. And the white male culture is not really excited about it. But it's happening, and it's real. And so we all have to figure out how to deal with that, I think.
A quick note from our nonprofit partners for the evening, Big City Mountaineers. They have one slot remaining for their Summit for Someone trip to the Grand Teton in Jackson Hole, July 16th through 19th, with Jackson Hole Mountain Guides. Help raise money for a great cause and have an experience of a lifetime. Contact Brian Martin at Brian, BRYAN, at bigcitymountaineers.org. And lastly, if you are in the Colorado area and have an interest in the topic of runner's high or relevant experience, we would love to hear from you. Write to us at info@dispatchradio.com for a special offer to take part in a mini citizen science research project.